bending, broken rule. Hound dog howling, bullfrog croaking. Everything is broken.
Hi, and welcome to Dad's Divorce Live. I'm Matt Allen, editor of DadsDivorce.com. Today we're talking with Bruce Sallan. Bruce writes a weekly column called A Dad's Point of View that is published in over 75 newspapers and websites around the world. The column touches on his experiences as a full-time single dad, and now that he is remarried, he is part of a blended family, and he writes about those topics in his column. Welcome, Bruce.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Matt.
Would you talk about your transition from you're this successful, career-oriented television producer, and you sort of turned into a full-time stay-at-home dad. What was that transition like for you?
Well, as with most transitions, even the good ones, it's stressful. And there was a lot of stress and a lot of adjustment that was involved. For me, I had a very vital career in showbiz, a lot of ego gratification, of course, and a decent income. When I got married and I had children, it became very quickly apparent that my wife was not especially interested in being an active mom. She loved the boys, but she wasn't that interested. And I felt strongly, not for any particular religious reasons or otherwise, but I felt very strongly that one of us should stay home. So I made the what turned out not to be that hard a choice to abandon my career and stay at home with my boys. And that decision wasn't all that difficult. The problem was, and I lived in Los Angeles at the time. I live in the outskirts of Los Angeles now, but at that time where I lived, there was a lot of talk about, dads could be parents too. But the reality is, and was, that I wasn't very well accepted, say, at the school groups where all the moms were,
right,
or even among my male peers. When they'd ask me, what am I doing? I'd say, well, I'm staying home with my boys, and they'd quickly say, well, when are you going back to work?
Right.
The implication that being a parent doesn't count, especially from a man's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a struggle. It was a difficult transition.
Yeah.
When the kids were younger, I also had my parents to take care of. They were older and ailing, and so that kept me busy. It all accelerated when my wife and I broke up. She then more or less fully abandoned parenting, and now I was a single 24/7 parent, with my parents getting even more ill over time, and that then became a bigger transition and a harder challenge.
What are the differences between being a single dad and a single mom?
Well, I'll tell you the biggest difference, I think, relates to kind of the differences I've experienced in my new marriage. As a full-time single dad, I paid less attention to cleanliness, to manners, to doing the dishes. I paid more attention to other things that I felt were more of a priority. When I remarried and my second wife came in the family, she started bringing what you might call traditional female values to our household, which is proper manners. Not that we were Slavs necessarily, but I wasn't as concerned about us, say, using our fingers to eat. And also, she ended up teaching my boys to do their own laundry. She ended up teaching them certain chores around the home. So I'd say, in a nutshell, men don't tend to focus on some of the details of raising kids, but on the bigger issues. And that's a huge generality. Mm-hmm. But it's no different. And I also write about men's and gender issues in general. So I would say it's no different than how men and women view the world, or how men and women view each other. Let's face it, men are much more driven in their relationships by the visual than women.
What were some of the challenges when you were the single dad raising the kids, and how have those been alleviated, if they have, with your second marriage?
Well, there were many challenges. As I said at the onset, one of the hardest was acceptance in my community. So the women at the schools, I wanted to volunteer at my kids' elementary schools.
Right.
And so I joined the parent-teacher groups, whatever they were called at the different schools that my boys attended. And I would attend a meeting, and there would be maybe one or two other dads, but the majority were women. And again, while they accepted me and appreciated what I was doing, they didn't know what to do with me. So a challenge was me and my boys were never invited to the play dates or the things like that the way other moms would gather around.
Right.
So I then ended up deciding, okay, I'm not going to be part of these groups. What I will do is I will work in my kids' class. Then I can have an active role in direct involvement in one of my kids' classes and or their teacher. And I will learn what is good and bad about what's going on in my kids' classes by firsthand. And instead of donating money, as was often the case, to the general parental fund, I gave money or specific things to my kids' classes. So I remember one of my kids' teachers desperately needed and wanted a printer, a copier printer, because the only time she could get anything copied was to send the kid to the main office. So rather than give money to the general drive, where I could have little participation in the choice of how it was spent, I said, okay, you don't want to have me as a guy, as a dad, part of your group. I'll give money and participate the way I know how, directly in my kids' classes.
Well, back to your writings, you grew out of this one column to, as we've mentioned, the 75 publications and sites. What do you think it is about your writing that makes it so appealing?
I think it's my candor. I think it's my willingness to expose my warts, so to speak.
Right.
I think it's also a directness. I like to think that I'm a layman expert. So unlike, say, a Dr. Phil, who I respect and I'm not being the least bit critical of, or a Dr. Laura, I don't bring the doctor to my writing. Mm-hmm. I bring the every person, in this case the every man. And I think I write and offer advice and tips without some overview of a study or psychological knowledge, or I do it from practical experience, exposure, reading, and I do it as a layman. I do it as the reader. So the reader will read my stuff, and they'll go, hey, that's me. I do that.
Right. Versus
being on a pedestal of, degrees.
Well, finally, Bruce, I know we have a lot of single dads out there watching and listening. Is there one piece of advice, your best piece of advice you can give to them as they try and raise their kids on their own?
Wow, to single it to one, I'm not sure, but I guess I will just take a page from my own life, and that is being patient is really, really important. Although I think I'll switch it. If I'm only going to give one, I would say that I once wrote a column called something, I don't remember the exact title, but it's something like, your kids may have your DNA, but they're not you. Mm-hmm. And I think a very important piece of advice is recognizing that your kids are not you, and therefore they may not have your same interests. And when they don't, you got to recognize it is not about you. Your kids are not brought into this world to play guitar because you like to play guitar or do a particular sport. So to me, that was a very important lesson to realize that my kids' interests weren't always going to be mine. And if I pushed them, I pushed them away. Instead, I would advise every parent, mom or dad, to find and expose your kids to as much as possible. And when you really discover that they have a passion, you make that really a priority, even if it's not a passion you share.
Right. Great. Well, Bruce, thank you very much. Continued success with your column, A Dad's Point of View, and good luck with the radio show demo.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
That was Bruce Sallan. You can find more information about him at www.brucesallan.com, or you can find him on Facebook. That does it for another edition of Dad's Divorce Live. I'm Matt Allen, editor of DadsDivorce.com, and we'll see you next time.
Broken pipe